Fierce warriors with little room for mercy or compassion. The Fenrir view themselves as great heroes of the Garou nation. However, their violent ways have been able to shock the rest of the Garou nation in how they carry them out. Many of you in my comment sections lately have discussed your displeasure around the Get of Fenris being removed from the new Werewolf edition. So I thought today we would talk about them. We would learn of their history. I want to try to paint a picture for you of what the Get were like going by the previous editions. It's very unlikely that anything I say here will have any impact to the 5th edition of Werewolf, being that they have decided to make it a standalone game. Regardless, we are going to take a look at the history of the Get from previous versions of the game. The mythic history of the Get of Fenris can read very much like a twisted version of Norse mythology. In a tribe or in a Caern of Get of Fenris, the strongest member is usually the leader. In fact, when it comes to Get society, anyone who wants to advance their status has to do so by combat, by physically defeating someone who is superior to them. Tribal moots, they begin with ritual combat, and only those who are victorious are able to participate in the rites. Even the badges of honor to a Get are literally carved into the flesh. Their spiritual encounters almost always deal with some kind of ritual combat with the Rite Master and the Spirit. And even their version of Valhalla is a giant, never-ending battlefield. Now, one place that we have to start to better understand the Get is in the area of love. What would you do to find the perfect match for yourself? Would you change who you are, adapting to what you perceive your love's ideal version of you is? Would you be unyielding in the face of compromise in order to make sure that your perfect partner has all the traits you desire? Most people will fall somewhere in the middle. However, like all things when you're dealing with the Get of Fenris, the first great leader of the tribe made a very extreme choice. Great Fenris was an Arun of the first pack. He was drawn to battle the worm's giant beasts in the northern part of the world. Fenris also refused to mate with anyone in his cairn or that of his tribe. He was very misogynist and believed that no woman, no human woman, could live up to his expectations. Thus, they were unworthy to bear his children. It wouldn't be until later in his life when he was battling giants, the giants of Jotun, also known as the Volog. This is where the first woman would catch his eye and be the object of his desire, a giantess named Sigun of the Vanir people. I am sorry that I am butchering many of these names. You should just come to expect this from me by now. Fenris pursued Sigun to her homeland and he proposed to her there. Unfortunately, he discovered during this proposal that she was betrothed to another giant. He then did what all Get of Fenris are very good at. He got angry and then he challenged the betrothed frost giant, the male one, to a duel. The battle was long. It raged for days and nights. It was fierce competition. Both opponents were incredibly physically strong as well as mentally strong. In the end, Fenrir was victorious. However, there was a bit of a catch. Fenrir had won, but it was also at great cost to his physical health. And after the battle was over and he was proclaimed victorious, he fell into unconsciousness. Moved by his ability in combat, Sigun nursed him back to health. And once Fenrir was back to his usual self, he had been nursed back to full strength. He then decided to put Sigun through 3 trials. Although she was the first woman to become the object of his desire, he still had to make sure that she could stand up to his expectations. And the trials that Sigun went through, they tested her wisdom, they tested her honor, and they tested her courage. Now, Sigun did pass all of these trials, and Fenrir took her as his mate. And from their union, Sigun bore Fenrir 3 sons: Garm, Rabjorn, and Frode. This was a good time in Fenrir's life. He was building a family worthy of his strength and carrying on in his name. But sadly, you can't always remain on top forever. But before we talk about the downfall of Fenrir, let's first discuss what his homeland was like and where it was located. It was probably right next to the like button, which you should probably hit if you're liking today's video. The traditional homeland of the Get of Fenris is believed to be Northern Europe. Their kinfolk were spread among the German, Scandinavian, and Norse tribes. Now, this area in early days had large populations. It was chock full of humans, kinfolk, werewolves, and let's not forget vampires in there as well. And with all of the human population exploding within the area, something would give rise to the werewolves. And anger would start to well up within all of the tribes, and it would create a huge division and explosive conflict in an event known as the Impergium. Now, at first, the Get of Fenris were not in support of the Impergium. They believed that it was not good to take breeding stock from those who would be your victims because they were weak. That meant that they were inferior. So they were not in support of culling humanity at first, though their minds were changed on this topic, and when they eventually decided to participate in the culling of humanity and keeping their human populations under control, they were especially effective at it. During the Bronze Age, the Get of Fenris were locked in battle against minions of the Worm. They sought out the influence that had survived the Ice Age and put down these gigantic monsters. And they were incredibly effective at this. They were actively working to replenish and rebuild their tribe's numbers. They went out among Gaia, they sowed forests to build the strength of the wild. And while they did this, they went out of their way to form alliances with creatures of the Fae, especially that of the trolls. And during this time, the major epicenter of all Get of Fenris activity was the Caern Heimhalla. Located in the Ural Mountains, this was the home to Fenrir and Sigun. These were the glory days for the Get of Fenris because they were actively at war with not one kingdom, but two kingdoms. The kingdom of giants, Utgard, and the Aesir kingdom of Valhalla. The Valhalla kingdom was led by a being known as Odin. Odin was waging a war against Heimhalla. This is because he was being tricked by his brother, Loki Skywalker. Secretly, Loki had desired to run both the kingdom of Utgard and the kingdom of Valhalla. And in order to sow the seeds of war, Loki was implanting visions in Odin's head of Heimhalla invading Valhalla. In response to these dreams and to the paranoia growing, Odin gathered his forces and waged war against Heimhalla. Odin chose the perfect moment for a tactical attack. He moved in when Heimhalla's forces were out waging war against Utgard. Now the Get were also betrayed by two individuals from within, and with the help of these individuals, Odin was able to crack the defenses of Heimhalla. Odin and his forces laid waste to Fenrir's kin. They destroyed his home, and they also massacred his wife, Sigun. Sigun was a brave woman. She was a valiant and strong warrior, but she could not stand on her own against such numbers, and Odin eventually slew her. But Sigun made a sacrifice. With her last breath, she was able to bring down the structure of the Caern. The collapse of the Caern crushed the invading forces within and saved the spiritual heart of the Caern with Sigun's sacrifice. Fenrir returned, saw the scene of destruction, and he vowed vengeance. In his current state, he was unable to lay waste to Valhalla and to Utgard, so he turned his attention westward, and here he established several cairns along the way. During the Dark Ages, the Fenrir went south, and they encountered, of course, the Roman Empire. The Fenrir were also encountering several other tribes in this area, which, not surprisingly, they went to war with. The Fianna, the Silver Fangs, and the Warders of Men, or the Glasswalkers, as they were known back in the day. Many of the battles they had, they went on to win. Not all of them, but many of them. They went on to go explore and find new places where Gaia's presence could be felt, make these their sacred places, and protect them. And some of the Get were able to reach as far as Britain to do this. There were also rumors of the Get making it across the ocean to Newfoundland. In this place of the Pure Lands, they would encounter the Pure Ones. Back over in Europe, the Get were also fighting against corrupted White Howlers. They blamed the Fianna for this corruption. This would cause the Get of Fenris to go to war with the Fianna, and both sides were pretty much locked in a stalemate, giving up ground, taking back ground. Eventually, a truce was called and the tribes stopped fighting each other and in turn directed their attentions to greater enemies. The Fenrir continued traveling south, going as far as Constantinople, and it's about this time where the term Get actually becomes used and associated with the Fenrir tribe. The rest of the Guru nation used it as a mocking term. It was supposed to be a put down for the tribe. But the Fenrir adopted it, they internalized it and turned it into a source of strength. They took this term and related it to some of their Norse gods, because it wasn't until near the end of the Dark Ages when Fenrir came back to lead his tribe. He took back control of the Get of Fenris. And with the tribe's new strength, with their new numbers, as they had grown over the hundreds of years, he pursued his old foe, Odin. Eventually, he tracked him back to the Ural Mountains where this all began. Here, the Fenrir did combat against Odin, his forces, and all the vile minions of the worm. What was surprising to the great Fenrir during his final battle, which he did not know this was going to be, there were other Get of Fenris among the enemies. The final result of this climax of story, this final battle, was the total eradication of Odin and his armies. But like all things, it came at a cost. The Great Fenrir was able to pull out a win. In order to win this battle, the Great Fenrir had to make a sacrifice. He had to give up his ability to stay within the material realm and was bound in silver chains and cursed to never again set foot on the other side of the gauntlet. And now that we know about the Get of Fenris in their history, let's talk about them in the modern day. Click here to find out more. Thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me and the channel. All of your support is greatly appreciated, especially my new patron, the Fenrisian. Thank you for your support. The video vote for this month has been a bit delayed. It should be there now. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.